Yay. We're going to start at our table of contents. And this week we are in the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. So we're on book number 4 out of 5. And we are in Parshat Behalotcha. So let's go ahead and do our song. Ready? Shut that. All right. We're starting at our table of contents. Don't let me sing alone. Tell me when you're with me. Mia's got the page. Rena, you're almost there. Ronnie, let us know when you got the page. Maya, Bella, you're with us.
Is it usually this?
No, we usually have a bigger crowd, but I actually know quite a few people are out of town. Lots of people traveling, actually.
We've been about 6 or 8 people.
Yeah. So, all right, let's start. Bereshis Noach lech lecha vayerach hayisara toldos. Bereshis Noach lech lecha vayerach hayisara toldos. Book number 2. V'shalach Yisrael Mishpatim Shemos va'era bo bo bo. V'shalach Yisrael Mishpatim Teruma Tetzaveh Tisa Vayakel Pekudei. Book number 3. Our song is getting longer. Vayikra Tav Shemini Tazri Amitzara Vayikra Tav Shemini Tazri Amitzara Achremos Kedoshim Emor Behar Bechukosai. Book number 4. We're in the book of Bamidbar. Bamidbar Naso Behalotcha. That's what we're up to. We're up to Parshat Behalotcha. And Behalotcha starts on page number 910. Hi, Terry. And
hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We are just getting started. We're having some interesting conversations.
Where is everybody? It's only like 4 people on Zoom.
I know. It's one of those weeks.
Where are you, Terry?
She's on the computer.
I
Oh.
understand. Who is that?
Cool.
Ron-
Is there a lot of people there?
Ronnie came back. She wants to know where you are.
Oh, I'm at home with the little one.
She's at home with the little one.
I don't think she's seen me anytime. I mean,
In a long time, right?
yeah, I know.
So we are in Parshat Behalotcha, and we'll start out with a joke because it always warms our hearts, right? So it's a cold winter day in communist Russia, and there's a rumor going around that there's a certain butcher shop that is going to have meat for sale the next day. That's a luxury. Next morning, long line forms around the butcher shop. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, an official comes out and he says, listen, comrades, I'm afraid there's not enough meat for everybody. Everyone who's a Jew, please leave. What else is new? All the Jews leave, but the line got shortened just a little bit. At 11 o'clock, the official comes out again. He says, I'm sorry, there's not going to be enough meat for everybody. Anybody who's a member of the non-party, please leave. Okay, the line gets a little bit shorter. At around 2 o'clock p.m., the official comes out again. He says, I'm so sorry, there's still not enough meat for everybody. Would anybody who did not defend our country from the German intruders, please leave. Okay, the line gets a little bit smaller. 5 o'clock, the official comes out again. He says, listen, guys, there's not enough. Anybody who did not participate in the liberation of our people from, the Tsar, please leave. Most of the line at that point already left. There's maybe 3 or 4 guys freezing in the bitter cold. Finally, at 8 o'clock at night, 12 hours later, the official comes out and there's a couple of people half frozen. And he says, there's no meat. So the old men, move away and they say, how come the Jews get the best of everything? How come the Jews get the best of everything? So the Jews get the best of everything. Well, this joke could be interpreted in many ways, but more importantly, how did the Jews survive in the desert? The manna. This whole entire time that one of the things that we've been talking about, how a huge bulk of the 5 books of the Torah is given to the time the Jewish people are traveling in the desert, in the Midbar, right? Because once the Jewish people received the Torah in the year 2448, the rest of which takes place in the middle of Chumash Shemais, which is in the middle of the 2nd book, the rest take place in the desert. So the desert is a huge part of our history. It's more than half of our actual Torah. So many of our life lessons come from this time in the desert. So we're reading about the journey of the Jewish people in the Midbar. And like Ronnie correctly said, how did the Jewish people survive? Through the man, or the manna in Hebrew. And the interesting, this food of the manna, what do you know about the manna? Hi, Lauren. So the Midrash tells us that number one, it was an unbelievable miracle that it tasted like whatever you wanted it to be. If you said, I'm in the mood of ice cream, it tasted like ice cream. You wanted it to taste like cookies or chicken or whatever you wanted, it actually absorbed and it tasted exactly like that. So that was one miracle. Hi, Lauren. In fact, it nourished the Jewish people for 40 years without fail. 40 years. That's how the Jewish people survived. And the Midrash goes into incredible explanation of how of the miracles of this wonder food, so to speak. Hey, Lauren, somebody's on camera. Yay. Come on camera, ladies. I'd love to see your face. So, but what's interesting is that at one point in the desert, the Jewish people are not satisfied with the manna, and their carnivorous appetite came forth, and they started to kvetch. The first of many complaints, they started to complain, and they said, Moshe, we want real stuff. We want meat. And Moshe was very disappointed with this request, and he turns to Hashem with bitter complaints. And Moshe tells the Jewish people, he says, why have you given me such a difficult nation to deal with? He basically turns to Hashem, and that's what he says. He says, we're going to get meat in the desert to feed these people. And Hashem reassures Moshe, he says, don't worry. And after that, quail, the meat of quail, rained down. We're going to see how that actually happened. And the people, they were provided with the meat that they so badly wanted. And the dialogue between Moshe and Hashem that we're going to read now inside the Chumash is fascinating. And there's going to be many questions on that, and that's going to be the theme and the focus of today's class. So let's start from the beginning. Let's see the dialogue. What happened? So open up to chapter 11, which is a little bit into Behalotcha. It's on page number 931, chapter 11, verse 11. Okay? All right, let's read this. You're with me, everybody? Chapter 11, verse 11. We're on page 931, the 3rd line. Okay? So Moshe says to Hashem, why have you mistreated your servant? Why have I not found favor in your eyes in that you placed the burden of this entire people upon me? Did I conceive the entire people? Did I give birth to them? Hi, Bella. Yay, a face. Why did you tell me, embrace them like a nurse carries a baby and lead them to the land you promised their forefathers? Where do I have meat to give all these people? For they're crying to me, saying, give us meat to eat. I cannot bear this entire people alone, as it's too hard for me. When Moshe saw a vision of the punishments due to the Jewish people from their complaints, he said, if this is the way you treat me, please kill me if you found favor in your eyes so that I do not have to see my misfortune. God says to Moshe, as for your complaint that you cannot bear the people alone, assemble for me 70 men of the elders. Okay, he goes through a whole punishment. But go through go to verse 18, and he says, you should, on page 933, you should say to the people, prepare yourselves for punishment. Well, he just says, prepare yourselves for tomorrow when you will eat meat, because you have cried into Hashem's ears, saying, who will give us meat to eat? We had it better in Egypt. And Hashem says, look what he writes. He says, it says, God will give you meat and you will eat. You will eat it not 1 day, not 2 days, not 5 days, not 10 days, and not 20 days, but for a whole month until it comes out of your nose and makes you sick. So if you go to verse 21, Moshe says, it is a people, he tells Hashem, it's a people of 600,000 on foot whom I am among. You're saying I'll give them meat to eat for a whole month? Could enough sheep and cattle possibly be slaughtered for them? Well, the fish of the sea were gathered for them. Would it be enough for them? It's question Hashem. So Hashem says to Moshe, is God's hand too short? You'll see if my word will be fulfilled for you or not. Moshe, so then Moshe went out to the people and he did what Hashem said. And if you continue going, we're not going to read every single part. Go to verse 30 on page 935. Go through the whole story. Moshe left the tent of the meeting, entered into the camp, and he and his elders of Israel did the same. And this is what happened. Hashem made a wind blow, which made quails fly from the sea, and soon they were spread all over the camp. The distance of a day's journey this way and a day's journey that way around the camp. They were flying at a height of around 2 cubits above the ground to make catching them easy. The people were busy all day, all night, and the next day gathering the quails. Even the ones who gathered the fewest collected 10 homers. They spread them around the camp in numerous layers. Okay, this is where we're going to end our reading. So this is a very interesting story. There's a lot of questions. Before I go into the questions that I have, tell me any questions that you have. Any questions? They did. They wanted to chew it. Texture. Any other questions? Yeah, but in this particular context, what do you, any questions on the story that pop right up?
We always want what we can't have. You can have everything except for one thing,
And that's what you want.
It's so
By the
unfair.
way, they were punished for this whole thing. So first of all, the first question that comes to mind is, Moshe sounds very bitter. He sounds frustrated. And he turns to Hashem and he like almost like pushes Hashem. Like, where are you going to get meat from? Like, how's this going to work? He's talking to Hashem. Like, it seems like he doesn't trust Hashem. It sounds like a little bit heretical. You know, Hashem, hey, Sandy,
Wow.
welcome. See your
Hi.
face. Missed you.
Thank you. Thank you. Missed being here.
Yes, Sandy, we're talking about we just finished reading in the story about the meat, that the Jews had manna, but they complained for meat. So you can read the story on your own, the exchange between Moshe
You're
and
stuck.
Hashem. What is it?
No, you were frozen, but you
Oh,
unfroze.
okay. So,
It's okay.
so the first question is, Moshe sounds like a heretic. You know, we're talking about Moshe here, the leader of the Jewish people. He's complaining to Hashem as if Hashem, you know, he says, you know, Hashem reassures him, don't worry, I'll have enough meat. So he says, really, 600,000 people on foot, and the people, you say I'll give them meat and they're going to eat for a full month. Like Hashem can't do anything. He only split the sea, you know what I mean? It's very inconsistent with what we know about Moshe as a person. So that's the first question. Question number 2, hello. That's okay. This is the theme today. Everybody's slowly coming in. It's okay. Same thing on Zoom. We started with Bella, and then we had the next one. Feel right at home. We're middle talking about the story of the manna, and the Jews are complaining in the desert that they want meat. Your favorite story? Perfectly. So as we continue, this is Shoshana, right? And this is Ronnie. For those that are wondering, Ronnie's back, so I'm very excited. I'm announcing it to everybody. So that's our first question. Moshe sounds like a heretic. We're on page 935. Moshe sounds like a heretic, inconsistent with what we know about it. Question number 2. Why, Hashem could have chosen any meat, right? Why quails? What
They're
are,
tiny.
that's why, like it was.
I was going to ask, what do they taste like? Chicken?
Right chicken.
So Mia says they cook fast like chicken. There's obviously a significance of why Hashem chose quail over other foods. There's many options in the carnivorous world of what Hashem could have chosen. And this is definitely not popular. It's not like, something we're all familiar with. So why did Hashem choose to give that to the Jewish people over everything? So we're going to start. This is actually I have to say, one of my favorite classes that I've studied. I find that, I don't know, that's just me personally. There's something about the way we're going to go today that's very exciting. We're going to start on the bottom. We're going to talk about Rashi, right? Rashi is always simple explanation, pshat. And we're going to go way higher, way deeper. So what does Rashi say? Rashi has the same question about Moshe. Could it be? And he has a discussion with Rabbi Shimon. And I'm not going to read through the whole text of Rashi, but basically there's an argument within the context of Rashi. Rabbi Shimon cannot fathom, right, that Moshe is a heretic. And he says Moshe doesn't utter statements that argue with Hashem. According to Rabbi Shimon, he explains that he knew, like we just read in the Chumash, that they were going to perish after. He knew that they were going to get punished and the people that complained were going to die. So he says, Hashem, it makes sense to feed them for 2 seconds and then to kill them. Does it make sense to feed them for a short while only to let them perish after? So Hashem says, yes, my power then will be viewed as inadequate, like I couldn't provide. So it's better that I feed them as per their request, and later they shall perish. So that's Rashi's explanation. That is, of course, God forbid Moshe is not a heretic. He was just having a discussion with Hashem. Why feed them if they're going to die? Okay, fair enough. But Hasidic philosophy and Kabbalic interpretation is going to approach this story with a brand new perspective and understanding of this dialogue. Mira, welcome. We're really on a roll today. Mira, welcome. We're talking about the story of the manna. The Jews are complaining about the meat. So Hasidic philosophy shows how the Torah is abundant with relevant symbolism. So there are certain narratives that many times there are things in the Torah that seem like a little bit maybe insignificant, or maybe like a petty argument. Like, who cares how Hashem spoke to Moshe? You know what I mean? Like, it's just one tiny couple of verses in this big Torah. Like, they seem seemingly okay, a little bit of an insignificant story. But Hasidic explanation shows that there's something deeper. And this particular story of and by the way, the quail in Hebrew is called slav. Slav, that was what the meat was called. This story of the slav is a perfect demonstration of the concept. Now, the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, explains in a fascinating Hasidic discourse how the arguing, the complaining of the Jewish people about the different types of food is symbolic of a certain type of worship that Moshe disapproved of. Let me tell Daisy to be a little quieter. The different foods mentioned in the desert are actually symbolized by a different method of worship. And Moshe disapproved of the level of worship that the food represented. That's in a nutshell. Let's go deeper. Let's explain. So we're going to approach this dialogue between Hashem and Moshe in a new way, in a deeper way. The way, like I explained before, the Torah has many levels. There's pshat, the simple explanation that you read the verse. Then there's remez, there's drash, That's what we did Rashi. We understood it a little bit deeper. Then there's remez. What's remez? That's hints. And then there's so the secrets. We're going to go all the way to the top and learn something fascinating. So before we understand the symbolism of this dialogue, let's first introduce a very fundamental idea in Kabbalah and Hasidus, which is called the Kabbalah of Food. In general, food is an interesting thing. Food has the ability to be elevated, and it has the ability to be degraded. For those of you that are Tanya fans or Tanya studiers or Tanya people who study Tanya know this idea from the Alter Rebbe, that if a person uses food, eats, and then uses that energy to learn Torah, do mitzvahs, and to do good things, then that energy of that food in their body gets elevated. And if they use the energy of the food in a gluttonous way or to do negative things, that food gets degraded. And Tanya talks about this in chapter 7, how the animal soul and the godly soul and what happens. And this is something I really recommend. I say this, I think, every week. Study Tanya. It'll change your life. And you'll understand life in a different way. But we understand that food has the ability to be elevated and food has the ability to be degraded. By the way, side point, indulgent and unnecessary foods are more susceptible to being degraded. It's easier to degrade meat than a vegetable. In fact, the Talmud tells us, I thought this is very interesting, that a spiritually numb person should not eat meat. But in a sense, you could understand that, because when a person sits down to like a big steak, there's something more gluttonous about than eating a vegetable, right? There's just, even just in the whole demeanor of the person. But of course, the Torah allows us to eat meat and encourages it, especially on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So there's room for it. But every food represents different energy, different levels of refinement, different levels of elevation and degradation. But regardless, if food represents an opportunity to serve Hashem, then the differences of different food represent different ways of serving God, right? Food in general is an opportunity to serve God. Different foods, different ways of serving Hashem. The unique characteristics of one food group will symbolize one way of serving Hashem, and the particular elements of another food group will symbolize yet another method of divine service. So the potential of food, according to Kabbalah, will help us understand this puzzling exchange that we just read between Moshe and Hashem. And each one of the foods that we mentioned, the manna, the slav, will bear a unique symbolism. Because when we understand the symbolism behind the food, we'll understand the theological themes behind the story. Ready?
Ready.
You're with me? It's a little deep, but it's like, whoa, like seriously, you're taking the story and you're going like, you know, we're listening to music. That's right. Okay, next. The Jewish people express a request for meat. What is the significance of this request? The only human food that contains blood is meat. Kabbalah explains that meat embodies passion, enjoyment, right? Excitement, a desire for like a fleshy experience, so to speak, that is tangible and conscious, like I feel Hashem. So when a person serves Hashem in a manner of meat, so to speak, it's a method where the person is serving God passionately with emotion and enthusiasm and excitement. So on the one hand, it might seem like the ultimate. That's the way you want to serve Hashem, right? You want to serve Hashem with enthusiasm. But the feeling of self in such a method is undeniable, right? Because this enthusiasm stems from, obviously, self-interest. I want to serve Hashem in such a way. I want to feel this gratification. So even though you're desiring the loftiest of relationships, a relationship with God, at the end of the day, it's the I that wants to experience that relationship, which is not a bad thing. We're human beings, right? The person himself is very much involved. So even if a person is passionate about their service of God and their relationship with Hashem, it's still I who wants to connect with God. Okay, that's meat. Man, on the other hand, was known as the bread, the godly bread that fell from the sky. So this was entirely a spiritual entity. In fact, the manna had such a spiritual nature that the Jewish people, when they ate the manna, they did not have to relieve themselves. In fact, the Talmud tells us how, excuse me, it was absorbed by the 248 limbs. It didn't get eliminated from their insides, meaning there was no waste. Why? Because the fact that it didn't have waste is also symbolic, that man symbolizes, the manna symbolizes an energy that cannot negatively affect the person. And right, it's represented by the fact of like a spiritual perfection, so to speak, where the individual feels utterly consumed, so to speak, by Hashem, and he doesn't have any room for anything individual, right? He's completely nullified before God. And at this level, there's no way that a person has any sin or ego, because he's completely, like the man, completely absorbed into the body, no waste. The person's in sync completely with God. There's no ego involved.
When you say no waste, that means that no one poops. Is that it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just a clarification. Ronnie said she knows that was Sandy. She sent, I feel you sending regards to each other.
Well, it's just clarification,
Yes,
because
so yeah.
the body is meant to do certain things.
Correct.
The body stays toned by doing certain things, and if you stop those certain things, then it's almost a vestigial organ. If you don't need your colon.
Right, and that's why the fact that there was zero waste from the manna shows how uber natural it was. It wasn't even something, in other words, Hashem designed the body to absorb and waste. Eliminate. Thank you. So that shows us that this food was supernatural, and that leads us to the next part of our discussion, which is now we can understand the tension between Moshe's requests and his forceful dialogue between Hashem. Moshe lived and embodied and personified the level of the man. He was utterly consumed, right, by Hashem's glory. He was completely nullified to Hashem. A person could not differentiate Moshe's will across God's will. They were completely fused. And to a certain degree, Moshe lost every sense of self. That's why he was the leader, because people were able to speak to Moshe, because Moshe embodied, so to speak, everything that Hashem's will just went straight through, which is a food that represents, in a sense, total perfection, was actually in Moshe's merit. The Talmud tells us that there were 3 good leaders for Israel: Moshe, Miriam, his sister, and his brother, Aaron. And each of them had a merit for one thing in the desert. For Moshe, it was the manna. For Miriam, it was what was a miracle in the desert that they had? There were 2 miracles that they had, 3 miracles. Manna was one of them in honor of Moshe. How did they drink? What was it? Very good. The well of Miriam, that was in her honor, that traveled with them. And then what led them? The cloud. The pillars of the cloud was in honor of Aaron. Yes. So Moshe fed the Jewish people the manna, in the sense that's what he represented. And he felt that he wanted them to be affected by this spiritual symbolism, so to speak. In this week's Parsha, the Jewish people asked for meat. It's quite differently the way Moshe wanted the Jewish people to serve Hashem. In other words, they said that we want to serve Hashem, but we want to maintain our individuality. We want to feel. We want to feel like unique beings, unique selves. And we want to feel this tangible excitement and enthusiasm in our relationship with God. So they said, with all our traits, with all our faults, with everything that's a part of us, we want to long for Hashem with that passion. And it's not that they longed for Hashem because they had nullified them and they had this like lofty desire to connect with Hashem. There was a selfish part of them that loved Hashem too. And there's a selfish part inside of us that loves Hashem. Right? Because we're human beings. So Moshe, understandably, was against this idea. And he wasn't only against this idea because he knew that it was a lower level, so to speak, of divine service. Like, obviously, it's ultimately best to be completely nullified. That wasn't the only reason why he was against this idea. It was more than that. How could somebody who's entirely nullified before God provide people with the material that they needed to express themselves as individuals? It's like a contradiction to his being. Understand? So that was the argument. Moshe is like appalled by their request. He turns to Hashem and he's like, how does this work? Did you hear what the Jews want? And shockingly, Hashem doesn't disagree with the Jews. He doesn't agree with the ideologically superior Moshe to some degree. And in the most surprising turn of events, he says, okay, don't worry, I'll give them meat. Now, what do you mean? You're going to give them meat? How can you possibly, so to speak, he requests of Hashem, how could you possibly suggest that meat, which is a selfless passion, be given precedence over the manna? I don't want them to be on such a level. He's symbolically arguing with Hashem. It's much lower energy than what they're used to receiving from the manna. So Moshe completely negates their request. He wants complete self-nullification. By the way, there's another reason why Moshe flatly was against this. Because, and this is very interesting, if a person's drive in general in life is completely based on self-interest and thrill, it could lead them in a way into very dangerous territory. Because there may come a time when the conventional path, so to speak, of divine service, it's not as exciting or as stimulating as it used to be. And this desperate thrill seeker, ego, is going to look for it somewhere else. In other words, Moshe was saying that if a person is constantly in the need to be enamored and infatuated by the spirituality that he experiences, then he'll just keep shopping around as things fancy him. That won't stick by the truth, regardless of how he feels. That was another one of his concerns, which is interesting. It's an interesting conversation. It's true, but and he has a point. But then again, what's a life with no passion? So Moshe argues with Hashem, this is not the way to go. And Hashem says, no, give them meat. And in a sense, Hashem validated the complaint of the Jewish people. Why? What could possibly be positive about the request of the Jewish people? What do you think? What was positive about their request? Stumped you?
They wanted to be more fully engaged and be more passionate.
They wanted an engagement, even though it has a sense of self, but they wanted that sense to fuel them. Here comes something even more interesting. The specific type of meat, remember that was our second question. Why this love? Why the quail? The specific type of meat that Hashem chose to give the Jewish people is the key to understanding the significance of Hashem's reply. Okay? We explained before that every food is symbolic of a unique service. So we know meat is fleshy, right? So that represents passion, and the manna is heavenly, which represents that egoless, selfless unity with Hashem. But he's decided to give him quail, slav. What is the symbolism of the slav? Many of the physical items mentioned in the Torah, it doesn't necessarily share all of the components of what is today contemporary quail. In fact, the slav of our story was not an ordinary quail. The Talmud tells us it was a very unique species that, unlike anything that ever came after it, it was a unique species of quail, and it had one outstanding feature. Does anybody know what the feature was? It had a feature that it had an excessive amount of fat and oil. In fact, the slav was so fatty, the Talmud tells us, that it would saturate 12 loaves of bread with oil. 12 loaves of bread saturated with oil. And this detail is very critical in our discussion because according to Kabbalah, oil is another symbolism of what? Right, but what? Yes. It's another symbolism of the word bittul, which is self-nullification. Why? So, should I take 2 minutes and go really deep or skip it?
No,
Go deep? I'll go. If you miss it, don't worry. I'll tell you when the hard part is over. If you got it, good. If not, not.
I know oil is very stimulating for the brain, so.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah. It's basically the oil. Brain is
That's true. Fish oil. Kabbalah examines this unique component. Okay, why is oil bittul? Why is oil nullification? Because oil, according to Kabbalah, well, we know this physically, oil never mingles with other liquids. If you mix liquid with oil, the oil will always remain aloof at the top. It doesn't like you'll shake. If you put oil into this and you shake it, the oil will rise. So the oil is compared to chachma. For those of you that study Tanya, this is for you. Chachma, what's chachma? It's the beginning of the intellectual process. The way the brain works is first you activate the power of chachma, that flash of inspiration. I've got an idea. And then it follows by bina, understanding it, fleshing it out, discussing it, developing it. This is with every thought. Yes, it's connected to the brain. Yes, yes. It's all connected. Chachma is the original flash of insight, right? It's that thrill of a new idea. When you are struck by, oh, I got a good idea. Like you just got this idea. You don't know anything about your idea. You just know that you've got like a good catch. That you're experiencing chachma. Bina, on the other hand, is right taking this chachma and making it into something. It's taking this flash of insight and it's elaborating it, etc. Now, when chachma comes to your mind, only a clean slate, fresh and an empty mind, is able to be a receptacle for this flash of inspiration. Because in order for chachma to have this initial conception, it's what Hasidus calls as bittul, this nullification. In other words, a person who has bittul, self-nullification, will not experience the ego, and then they can consciously or subconsciously focus on receiving inspiration. It's very hard to receive inspiration if you're so filled with self. Chachma only comes when you're open. It's like, when you're in the shower and you're emptying your thoughts, that's when the good idea comes, because you're just like letting it go. So bina, being that the flash of an understanding, which is called chachma, is the beginning of the intellectual process. In a sense, conceptually, chachma is the highest level of intellect. Are you with me? So this height, so to speak, represents an aloofness like oil, right? The oil has an aloofness, it doesn't mix. That's why oil and chachma they share the same, Kabbalistically, the same characteristic of bittul. So in the context of serving God, oil and bittul are one of the same. Oil and self-nullification are representative in oil. End of difficult section.
Oh, this is amazing. It's great.
It's deep
You know,
stuff.
today they discovered keto diet, which is, so actually to create some kind of level of purification
Within the body, a level of chachma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
They should just read Kabbalah. They'd be good to go. All right, that's the end of the difficult part. Let's come back. So we're talking about the fact that the meat was fatty, was oily. And I said that Kabbalah says that oil represents nullification. Whether you understood why or not, that's where we're holding. So if you recall, meat symbolizes passion. And oil represents nullification. So oily meat is a fusion of the two theories of Moshe and the Jewish people. In other words, the Jews wanted meat. The Moshe wanted mun. The oxymoron of oil and meat is God's response. In other words, this oxymoron is the beauty of Hashem's response. Moshe was indeed correct that meat alone is not the preferred method, pure selfishness. But mun, according to Hashem, is also not the correct method. It's not enough. The two characteristics of self and nullification need to be combined. And then the person has reached the ultimate of his divine service. Excuse me. Pretty heavy, huh? You're with me? So let's understand. So Hashem is saying, take the oil, the nullification, the mun, take the meat and fuse it. So what does that mean practically? Either you're self or you're selfless. I mean, is there a way to combine? So we're going to understand it. Let's look at marriage, right? Everybody's been in some sort of relationship at some point in their lives, right? And if I were to ask you, how important is it to marry a good-looking person? What do you think the answer is in marriage? Okay. Says for women, it's less important than for men, right? Many people who have been around for more than a day agree that while it's obviously important that you have an attraction to your spouse, it's definitely not the most important thing, because as you live with the person, the beauty that you find comes from within. And a person could be beautiful on the outside, but if they're not beautiful on the inside, you basically get divorced. It's definitely. And in fact, we're going to talk about what Torah tells us in connection to this question. So while in college, people don't think of relationships on those terms, when a person hunkers down for real life, they realize that marriage is not about what the person looks like, but it's about finding the beauty within and finding a long-lasting relationship. And obviously, if you're not attracted to the person, it's hard to start that off to begin with. You need to start it off. So let's take let's look at two men, right? We'll talk about Mike and Jeff. When a person starts off a relationship, the sense of self is very present in the beginning of a marriage or in a relationship, right? Let's say Mike is dating Cheryl for a long time now, and he's completely enamored with Cheryl's persona, her grace, the way she carries herself. He loves everything about her. And he's so enamored. Nothing's better than Cheryl's sliced bread. And before long, he thinks to himself, I used to be a bachelor. I was alone. I was a beast. I was locked up. But now look what Cheryl brings out of me. I'm ready to conquer the world. So while he's truly enamored with Cheryl, really the affection that he feels is nothing more than a product for the love he has for himself. In the sense that he discovered how greatly his life is enhanced now that he has Cheryl in his life. Of course, he loves her to no end. But you can't really say that Mike loves Cheryl because he loves the feeling he gets when he's with her. That's where it ends at this point in their relationship. But then there's Jeff. And Jeff has been married to Eva for many years. And they've enjoyed a long-lasting, loving relationship. And he remembers that he used to feel the way Mike did. But he progressed from that stage in the relationship, which every relationship automatically starts off in that way. And now it's a completely different level of connection with his wife. He stopped thinking only about himself and the feeling he gets when he's around his wife. Now they think in the terms of we. Now when Jeff and Eva are walking together, if one of them trips, if they both trip, he right away makes sure, is Eva okay? If somebody says something nasty to his wife, he's offended. Well, why is he offended? Because you hurt my wife, you hurt me. And this collective unit of we overcomes the feeling of me. He thinks in the terms of we. So now Jeff is in a place where this feeling and desire to make him feel good has sort of gone a little bit on the lower totem, and now it's about we. Obviously, this isn't a good, healthy marriage. So who's a better husband?
How do you
Mike or-
get to that? How do you get to the we point? What makes Jeff say we and someone else doesn't say we? How do you get to that point?
So this is a good question. And it's probably a long answer, but I would probably say that it takes two in a marriage to become that way.
Yeah, lots of patience from his wife.
It's an understanding of what marriage is about. And it takes two in a couple to go from the two I's to the we. And how one gets to that we, it's a very interesting question. I'm thinking which angle to approach it in. Does anybody have insight?
I do.
Shared experiences.
Ronnie says shared experiences. Okay. But how does one get from the I to the we? Like, where does when the I gets suppressed? Not suppressed in a bad way, but like it's not only about me anymore.
Yeah, I don't.
And we. Right. That's beautiful.
Also, I think having a child makes you a we. Rather than-
Automatically unites you.
Not always. No, we don't have a child. It's just
What,
I don't
different
know.
for different.
Different people. You're saying just one element that unites a couple.
But look at the divorce rate. When you have a child, people divorce.
People divorce, but not all people divorce.
Right. That's what, yeah.
Many people having a child, that shared experience and the love of that child brings them close together.
I can tell you that if you have a special needs child, over 80% of.
Yes, I know that.
divorce.
Yeah.
So
I do
depends
know
on the.
But you're talking about especially.
Well, also, everybody also can say in different ways. Some marriages will say that a child brought them closer, and some will
Right.
say that it divided them, just like tragedy. Some tragedies unite couples, some
No,
tragedies
but
divide
it's
people.
true. Very many people with special needs get children divorced.
Yeah.
Um,
Which I
No,
know.
I was a principal of a school that had autistic children. That was part of the population of the school. And in my experience, most of those parents got divorced.
Wow.
Yeah, that is very hard to. So it depends maybe on challenges.
Right. I think also,
Goal that you have together.
I think that ego plays a very big role. I think that when a person is willing to make room for another, you're able, in the beginning, in order for a relationship to work, you must have the I. Otherwise, why allow another person into your life? But as a relationship progresses, the more one works on subduing their ego, not their interests, their ego. It's different. Subtle, but it's different. The more the relationship becomes a we.
Can I add something?
Yes.
For me, it works patience and forgiveness.
And that comes from letting our ego go. To forgive and to be patient, we need to say, okay, you're upset. Ego. Yes. We could have a very long discussion about this, and it is a good conversation, but actually,
It may be many things
and also different people,
and different.
right? Different, there's so many elements that bring, yeah. Yeah. And we have different role models in our life. We have different circumstances. People come from different places. But let's come back. I was giving you an example for a reason. And we took off with it. Come on in, Leona. It's never too late. Yeah. So one would think that the Torah would think that the ideal relationship is Jeff, right? The ultimate relationship. One would think that the Torah's view would be that the person should have a stellar, character, a beautiful inside. But in fact, the Talmud tells us that while we may think that a man who does not care about the physical appearance of his wife is like the ultimate, right? He has the truest value. He's an idealist, but the Torah actually instructs us in the Talmud. We read that you have to check out the woman that you are to marry to ensure that you are physically attracted to her. So why does the Torah obligate us to hold to such a standard, right? What's wrong with taking the higher road and marrying just on the belief of ideals? Like, is the Torah not aware of this altruistic level of a relationship that, that we want to reach, the sense of we? So the answer to this is that the Torah wishes that the level of depth in the relationship that we have with our spouse should be on a very deep and real level. In fact, this mirrors the relationship that we have with Hashem. We know that it's very symbolic constantly that the connection of the Jewish people and Hashem is like a husband and a wife, right? It talks about this in Shir Hashirim, Songs of Songs. So when you look at the two people we mentioned, right, Mike and Jeff, so you might say that someone like Mike is using Cheryl to, like, as a channel, so to speak, for himself. And you might look at Jeff, the second guy, as someone who completely forgot about himself to achieve perfect harmony. really the winner is if both of those feelings come together. Because if Jeff can take his personal feelings that he felt at the beginning, that passion and excitement at the beginning of his relationship, and bring that into the union with his wife that eventually becomes a we, that's the ultimate. In other words, think about it, right? This altruistic level that Jeff sometimes reaches with his spouse, maybe could sometimes lack a certain passion and excitement. In this department, Mike holds the trophy. But really, a good husband is somebody that puts his own passions aside and cares about what his wife is. So ultimately, what happens is that the ultimate relationship is sort of going from kind of feeling like you just got engaged to being with the feeling of being married 50 years. Can you combine it? It's possible. Because anyone who's been married for 50 years knows that, and happily married, knows that there's something so special about that we that no freshly engaged couple can experience that as much as in love they are. But anybody also knows that the fresh beauty of a couple in love, there's a certain passion and excitement to that. So the combination of those two elements is according to Hashem, is the ultimate. And by the way, on a side point, the Torah actually gives us tools on how to achieve that. Some of the mitzvos that we apply to marriage, the laws of mikvah, the law, and many other things. And really, Torah's view on marriage is really its own course. And I encourage really anybody just to either to enhance a marriage or a relationship to really understand the view of Torah's view on marriage, because it's fascinating. But regardless, that is why the Torah demands that a husband finds his wife attractive. He's saying, the Torah doesn't tell us that you have to completely nullify yourself. It says incorporate it into your selfless dedication to your spouse. And this is the merging that Hashem told Moshe that the Jewish people need. Well, Moshe felt you have to put aside all your sense of self to serve Hashem. Hashem was actually telling him, hey, Moshe, that's not the ultimate. There's no need to deny the Jewish people's desire for meat. They want this passionate experience in serving Hashem, but take it oily, indulge in it, and absorb it into your relationship. In other words, you're not a separate entity that's excited, like Mike. You're one with Hashem. Make it into that combination, the self-nullification and the passion. That's the perfect merging of human passion and selfless devotion that Hashem tells us about. In fact, the Chaya, there's many proofs here in the Torah in general that explain this concept. Being completely devoted to Hashem, while it's a very lofty goal, it can sometimes lack the passion and excitement that a human being is capable of. And in a sense, utterly devoting oneself to serving God, right, and to doing his mitzvos and all of that good stuff and learning Torah, it stems from a part of us that is more spiritual, that's more altruistic, and it sometimes can be like missing that thrill and that excitement. So one could say, really, you're looking for thrill and excitement? That's what you get when you go down a roller coaster, or a good massage in a fancy hotel. What is it? This feeling of thrill and sensation is, in a sense, much more than any other spiritual feeling that you're going to experience. Because anytime you have an emotion, right, a thrill, a passion, it's something that's very driving. Anybody knows, right, that you've had a certain passion about something in your life, right? When you're in the mood and you're in the mood of, let's say, a good glass of wine, right? That's very physical. There's nothing stopping you. It's very raw. It's very powerful. So Hashem tells tells Moshe, tell the Jewish people to bring along their meat, so to speak, for the ride. Because when you become completely absorbed yourself in this divine reality, but you keep your excitement, then that emotion is going to keep you thriving and connecting to Hashem. And then even your selfish desires become part of that dedication, because you're not like some robot that's, squashed into saying, this is how it's done, this is what one needs to do, but rather you yourself has that passion and is able to serve Hashem. And when human passion, and this was Hashem's message to Moshe, when human passion is directed towards God, unbelievable things can happen. It's like you see it in a teenager, right? When a teenager gets excited, because teenagers are powerful, amongst other things. When they devote their passion for something powerful, the world can change. Wait a second, Ronnie, you had a question. Shoshana, go ahead.
No, I have just one question. So
Yes.
when they have this lack of passion and they get mana for many days, I don't know, I think
Till they came to the land of Israel.
so yes.
Their experiences were different.
But it was a different generation.
Absolutely. In fact, when they came to the land of Israel, the manna stopped.
Yeah, so mana stopped when they came to that. And then they had different, that was the next generation after the generation of the slaves.
Yeah, slow.
But the slaves, they kept with them certain kind of slavery. This is something that probably was very hard for them. So if they I think if they had that, there was no other way for them.
Yeah, every generation to deal with the pain. Interesting. Every generation gets what they need. And we have to remember that as well for ourselves, is that wherever we are in life, that's exactly where we're meant to be. Each and every one of us are born into this generation of time because that's what our souls need for its mission. The Jews in the times of the desert, that's what their mission was. And in fact, the manna that they received was like a huge inspiration from above, that they were able to take that inspiration when they got to the land of Israel and start to bring the inspiration from below, when they started to work the land, etc.
What if one person in the family has so much money, they have accumulated so much, and a youngster in the same family has watched this, and whenever this person is on television, he speaks to the money that goes on in New York. And this relative always puts his name into, it's like he wants to be where this cousin is.
No, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I watched it happen last night.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't
So I think the Rebbe puts this concept in the most fascinating way. He writes, the truest and loftiest level is when the godly soul is able to affect the animal soul to the extent that the latter herself is aroused to God. The ultimate is when it's not just stemming from our neshama. Obviously, our neshama wants to connect with Hashem. But when the neshama is able to affect the animal soul to get involved in the process. And in essence, this is truly the ultimate way that we need to live our lives. We need to live our lives with the balance and the fusion of the two, the oil and the meat. We must have a sense of bittul. It's probably one of the biggest things missing in the world. If people, can you imagine, people nullify their ego just for like a second, you know, the world would be a different world. There's so much ego that plays into, ego is the root of so much negativity in the world. Even in this, I'm not even talking about the big things. I'm talking about even like in interpersonal relationships, right? Relationships between each other, relationships with your children, right? I know, like I was having a conversation with one of my kids last night. I was getting so frustrated about something. And then I'm like, I told myself, I'm like, okay, hear this kid's view. And like the whole conversation changed. Something stupid. Which is, well, that's the other part. The minute we take our ego, just for like a minute, we nullify it, everything changes. But that doesn't mean we need to take our sense of self out of living in this world. Because at the end of the day, we're not tzaddikim. Hashem did not tell us that we have to live a life of nullification. And he told Moshe, you're a tzaddik. So that's good for you. But the rest of us who are aspiring Beinonim, we need the combo of both. And when we bring the Nefesh HaBahamis, the animal soul, into the ride, we can accomplish great things. So the next time you have a challenge, which will probably be within 5 minutes, when you walk out the door, because that's what our life is filled with. The next time we have a question of how to approach something, and we remember that the combination of these two elements is what is the driving force behind living in our lives and behind everything that we do. So that's taking the story of the Slav on like a completely different level. We understand the Slav now in a whole new way. Yes. For sure. For sure. Of course. It's a choice we make though.
Yeah, because you can go almost as much on the ego, but then
Some people survive many years.
that's true.
Not saying that they may survive, they may not thrive.
Right.
Survive and thrive. It's two different things.
Yeah.
So that's it for Parshas Behalotcha. Next week is, yeah. Next week is Parsha Shlach. You know what Parsha Shlach is? What's the famous Parsha? This is the famous Parsha. What does Shlach mean? Send. Who was sent? The next week's Parsha. What's the next complaint the Jews have? What is it? Very good. The spies. That's an interest. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Just you wait.
I'm fascinated about the giants.
Yeah. Aw. You could come on Zoom. But I will see you next Tuesday. And those who want to hang out for the schmooze, we'll be starting in 10 minutes. Sandy and Bella and Maya and Terry, so good to see you all. You're muted, Sandy, but I see you saying thank you. Where are you going, Leona? Oh, nice.
Not me. No.
All right, ladies. Listen.
Okay, thank you.
Uh,
Bye.
No. A rainbow.
A rainbow. And